Hello, my name is Monique T. Sam, and this is my applied assignment presentation. Hope you all enjoy. On my first slide here is my pre-work, and to follow the table of contents, explaining my topic and why I chose this topic and any prior knowledge I had, as well as my course materials and my research. I will also discuss what I learned and the evidence in connection to the course materials. I will then pose some questions at the end of my presentation for you to think about. My pre-work is on disabilities in education. The topic I chose is transition of disabilities from a tribal early childhood education setting to the mainstream public school district. The reason I chose this topic is because I want to know if parents in our local tribal community feel any difference in the support and services they receive from both community settings. I felt this was important because I had worked with many families to support them while in the tribal early childhood education, and I have been curious about the transition and if these families feel that they've received the same support or less. The aspect of inclusion is based on equality and inclusion and services and supports from county services to the public school district. And the photos in this slide, to the right, you'll see a child. This is the child that I am doing the interview on. This is the school that is located on the Bishop Paiute Reservation, as well as the mainstream public school system, elementary school TK through 5th grade below. And next is my interview. I interviewed Talia Turner. She is a tribal member of the Bishop Paiute tribe in Bishop, California. She's the mother to a young child who has been diagnosed with behavioral speech and moderate autism. Her son has been in the early Head Start program, which I worked for. And I felt that she could bring some experiences that she has learned to navigate and share with me. She has had some challenges over the past few years, and she has learned a lot about working through them. A little background knowledge. As I mentioned previously, I had worked with Talia's son at a tribally operated early Head Start program on the Bishop Indian Reservation. And I felt that he would be a great candidate for this study. These are my course materials I found interesting and correlated with my studies. I chose the first material so that I can get an understanding of inequalities in the special education system. I also realized there is a pattern with several materials and different cultures having challenges with parents not understanding their rights or child's rights during IEP meetings, as well as feeling as if the school professionals were making the decisions and they were just agreeing. As Talia also mentioned, she has learned over time, and she's explained she came with her tools and they pulled everything out of the bag. This time they hired a one-on-one aide. They bought him all the learning tools. So she had learned to advocate on behalf of her son. The next article that I chose was The Myth of Culture of Poverty. I felt that this article was interesting in the fact that it would help me to better understand the beliefs that many have on families in the education system that come from small communities but suffer from poverty, such as my interviewee. And I wanted to take into consideration the biases that we all may have and how this will affect our students as teachers in the school. So here's a little quote from that article. We must consider how our own class biases affect the interactions and expectations of our students. Next is the research that I chose outside of the class. And the first article is a study due to the nature of this being a Native American family. I decided to use this article, although it's based off of another tribe. I wanted to see if there were any similarities between the two. And interestingly, I did find that my subject, when interviewed, she had shared similarities with her lack of involvement in the IEP meeting in the first few years, as well as not understanding or comprehending much of that IEP meeting. And it took her quite some time before she started realizing the complexities of her child's disabilities before she could stand up and advocate on his behalf. And in this case study, this research article, there were also similarities for families within the tribe that it discussed. And then I also chose community inclusion for children and youth with developmental disabilities. This was a good article to see how children of other cultures and disabilities can be included in the community. This was a tool to review how the school community can include a child who's coming from another cultural community. And my findings in this article discuss that a cautionary tale in which members of cultural minority groups may not have found the program inclusive. So they did have a struggle trying to include cultural and racial groups with disabilities into the community. They decided that it was most important to speak with families regarding their beliefs about the disabilities and their concerns, working with strangers, etc. So then that way they could find better ways to make more inclusive settings for those children. Next is my evidence. And here you'll see the questions for my interview with Talia Turner. I held this interview on September 19th at 1 p.m. And you can also see to the right a copy of my email confirmation of this interview. And my new learnings. So for inclusion, participation in the community, inclusion in general education population, social communications, and inclusion of cultural differences in education. I found that during my interview, I found that the mother explained that she was okay with her son being in the CDS setting because he was with other children that they had paired him up with that had similar disabilities. And they actually did reach out to her at some point to try and move her son into a regular general education class and out of the special needs class that he was currently in. And then next was equity, which is equal access to education, equal treatment as to disabilities, equal rights and opportunities compared to other races and socioeconomic backgrounds. During the interview, the mother described that she had never fully known her rights. So by the end of the interview, she did discuss that she had, paid more attention and found ways to advocate on his behalf and learn about the system. She also did mention at one point that she felt that there was a difference with how the state employees had treated her compared to the school district. And she had felt like the school district was actually taking more steps to provide the things that her son had needed. And also making sure that he had the staff on hand to help him through this process. The next new learning item is access, which is availability of resources, access to tools, use of proper techniques to assist student, and appropriate support from the teaching staff. As I slightly mentioned in the last screen that he was able to be provided with tools, which were also included as the behavioral specialist, the therapist for speech, and an occupational therapist, as well as a one-on-one aide. His mother also explained that they were not using the right tools in the past, so they were using physical touch and their hands to redirect him, and they weren't identifying his triggers. And she mentioned he liked to be soothed. Often the physical touch would interfere with his learning because he did not like to be touched. So these were important tools to pay attention to and learn from. And continued inquiry. So now I am curious to know if there is any way that we can find research grants to help support the families and to hire advocates to help guide these families with children experiencing disabilities within the tribal community to help them advocate and understand their rights and the child's rights. If they had someone to help support them, this could alleviate many of the cultural misconceptions, as well as making sure they receive services under the IDEA. And in order to help bring this process through, I wanted to try and bring this idea forward to the tribal council to see if there were different routes we can take to get this idea going for our families in need. And now are my questions for my peers. As most of you are going into the field of education, how would you support a family of another background or race to navigate the disabilities process? And also, how would you familiarize yourself with another family to better understand their transition into the school system when coming from another community, such as a tribal community, with a disability? And last are the credits of the template I used. And that is the end. Thank you. Have a good evening.